call to order the Town Council meeting, Mount Pleasant Town Council for Tuesday, May 12th. It is past the hour of 6 p.m. For those of you wondering, we were in a budget committee meeting before this that ran over, but the budget committee had to precede what we're getting ready to do here. I will go to the clerk of council to begin with the roll call, please.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Haney.
Present.
Mayor Haney is present. Mr. Chapman.
Present.
Mr. Chapman is present. Ms. Corley.
Present.
Ms. Corley is present. Ms. Hyatt.
Present.
Ms. Hyatt is present. Ms. Landing.
Present.
Ms. Landing is present. Mr. O'Rourke.
Present.
Mr. O'Rourke is present. Mr. Rambo.
Here.
Mr. Rambo is present. Mr. Santos.
Here.
Mr. Santos is present. Ms. Whitley.
Present.
Ms. Whitley is present. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 100% attendance, so obviously we have enough to constitute a quorum. We appreciate everybody hanging in there with us for video meetings as are allowed under emergency ordinances, both by the state and the town of Mount Pleasant. So we would be in compliance. Item number 3 is a prayer. Unless someone else volunteered, I believe that would be Mr. Santos.
Well, we did have a volunteer, actually. Miss Landing volunteered.
Thank you. I did not hear that. Ms. Landing, would you like to lead us in a prayer, please?
I would love to.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess I need to turn my thing sideways here. Hold on. May we bow our heads, please? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your constant guidance, grace, and mercy for all that our community and our country and our world have been through in the last 6 to 8 weeks. We pray for your continuing leadership in showing us the way to treat each other, to work hard to be able to solve the problems before us, and to be able to eventually get our lives back to a more normal level. Lord, thank you so much for your many, many blessings. Help us to always remember the good things, even as we're going through the bad things. And we appreciate them that much more. In your son's name, amen.
Amen. Mayor Pro Tem O'Rourke, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And I have a flag right here if anybody needs to pledge to it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
of
America,
and
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you very much. Item number 5 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved unanimously. Item number 6 is approval of the minutes from the March 17th and March 27th, 2020 emergency town council meetings, the April 14th, 2020 town council meeting, and the April 2020 financial statement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes are approved unanimously. This moves us to item 7, public comment, which had to be received by 2 p.m. via email or voicemail. The clerk has distributed those to each of us. They will be included in the minutes as published. Item number 8 is committee reports. Item A is from economic development, so I will turn this over to Mrs. Landing.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So in our meeting last week, we discussed the fact that with the virus and the difficulty put upon our community, that we try to do some things that might help a little bit in dealing with this difficulty. And so normally our business license tax would be paid on or before July 31st each year. So in an effort to try to provide some regulatory relief, The Economic Development Committee of Town Council recommended that the due date be delayed until August 31st, 2020, with all other terms remaining in place.
What was that again? August what?
August 31st, 2020.
August 31st, 2020.
So 30-day deferral on the license tax.
Okay, is that a motion from the committee, which does not require a second, but we usually do that anyway, so if someone wants to do that, we can do that.
Well, it is a motion from the committee.
Okay, so we have a motion from the committee, does not require a second, to extend the business license tax payment date till August 31st, 2020. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Gary. Just want to confirm that that was already mentioned in our budget committee meeting and approved.
Right.
Okay.
Just to ask staff, Mr. Demora, does delaying the receipt of the business license tax present any problem for us cash flow wise?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other
Miss-
discussion? Yes, Ms.
Mr.
Land.
Mayor, I'd like to say, I believe it was mentioned in the thing, but I think we still had to approve this as a separate item because this is the first time it's being brought to council
That's fine.
as an item to be passed. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. That's what I was wondering.
Yep. Just to make sure and to legal, this is a temporary, this does not establish anything permanent, correct? This is only till August 31st, 2020. Of course, we can reevaluate, but after that, it goes back to normal. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor and Council. This is not a new fee, changing a fee, which would require additional action. This is essentially delaying due date.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just a quick question for Ms. Landing. I think I tried to watch as much as I could of the committee meeting, and was there also talk of impact fee delay, a delayed impact fee schedule? I thought that was going to be on here as well.
We did discuss that, and I don't think that it was part of the budget, so that's why it wasn't brought up tonight.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
It wasn't something to be passed tonight.
gotcha. Okay, that's all my only question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion before we vote to extend the business license remittance due date until August 31st, 2020? This is a one-time thing. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 8B is from the Finance Committee. Recommendation to accept the fiscal year 2019 Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. I'll turn that over to whomever is going to present that to us.
I think Marcy can handle that.
Thank you.
Go on, Aaron.
Yes, sir. So the town of Mount Pleasant was awarded a grant to provide funding to allow the town to have an independent contractor design and engineer a townwide flood assessment map product in the amount of $118,125 with a required match of $39,375 for a total project budget of $157,500. This came out of Hurricane Florence, and that's why the timing is such. The match is available.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and we have a second. So just to interpret the what's on the screen, the grant is 118 and we only have to put in 39,000 to have $157,500 of flood assessment map. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When will this be completed?
Oh, gosh. It actually, the first quarter is about to start, so we're good to begin this work. We'll have to contract, because it's federal funds, properly with a contractor.
Okay, so it will be being done in our 2021 fiscal year. Will it be completed? Do we know, or is it, how long does something like this take?
I do not know. I will know when we bring it back to Bids and Purchases Committee, because it is going to be an award of more than 100,000. At
Right.
that time, we will have a timeline for council.
Okay. But the point is, it gets us started on a flood assessment now.
Townwide, yes, sir.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the recommendation to accept the flood hazard mitigation grant program, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the recommendation passes unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 9 is adoption of a resolution by the town of Mount Pleasant, making a declaration of intent to enter into lease purchase agreements. We just went over this in the budget committee. This is for heavy equipment and public services and fire. And we understand that some of these are past their useful life.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve
Second.
Second.
and a second. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the second on that?
Tom.
Thank you.
For those that are members of the public that are joining us, that are looking at this online, if you weren't in the budget committee meeting, some of these are years past their useful life. And this is the kind of equipment that keeps the town going, and this is critical stuff. These aren't, these aren't for personal use or anything like that. So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion before we vote?
Mayor, I just have a question. It's
Yes,
Brenda.
ma'am. Sounds like Ms. Corley.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Do we sell those to anybody, or we just, what happens to that stuff once it's outlived its life?
Yes, ma'am. According to our procurement ordinance, what we do is we have in the procurement division someone that puts these and places them on Gov Deals. And on Gov Deals, we do sell them, and that revenue does come back into the budget. We also added a section in our ordinance to allow us to use a broker if we feel that we could get a better deal, or if we can use them to bring down the price of the new one. So we take all those mechanisms to get the best deal for the town.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
All right. Any further questions or discussion before we vote? All in favor of the resolution making a declaration of intent to enter into lease purchase agreements, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. Okay, item number 10. An ordinance to adopt and appropriate a budget for the town of Mount Pleasant for fiscal year 2021, which begins July 1st of 2020 and runs through June 30th, 2021. This is ordinance number 20024.
Motion to approve.
We have a
Second.
motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. We are in discussion. Mr. Demora, briefly, since we are in a different meeting, we won't go down into the weeds as much as we did, but for the minutes, since this is the final reading of the budget, would you give us the quick version of why, when you look at the total of what was proposed and then what is recommended, which is the 111 million on the far right, why it looks like it didn't change by much, but yet it has changed by over $6 million.
Yes, sir. Be glad to. And you said it very well, Mayor. What has happened is, in the budget that, for those who may be watching at home or listening at home, that this amended budget is different from the original proposal that received first reading prior to the pandemic. And what is different about this budget is this is a responsive budget, or a budget that's been developed in response to what is coming, a significant financial hit to the town of Mount Pleasant. The overarching goal is to maintain services to our citizens and our business owners throughout the year. This budget that you see in front contains a multi-layered approach. The big issue is that money that may have been reserved for a particular project, or for raises, or for wage and classification implementation, salary type stuff, those monies have instead been lifted and sent to a reserve account where it will sit and can only be spent by council. And that money is there and can be deployed depending on the conditions that the community is facing going forward budgetarily.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Yes, I am, because we were getting feedback. Thank you. Let me ask legal, and let me ask our clerk, since we went into great detail in the budget committee meeting, which is a committee of the whole, which is all of us, before this, could we use the minutes of that as an attachment to this to show the level of detail we went into? You know, if you just look at this and you're looking back, you may say they didn't even discuss it. You know, they didn't even, council didn't even get down into the weeds about what are you doing if the economy is much worse once we start our fiscal year in July. I'd like to know, I guess, Mr. Pagliarini, can we use that discussion from the budget committee as detail to attach to the minutes of this, so that we don't have to have all those discussions all over again? Because yes, indeed, we delved into all these numbers and the great work done by the finance committee to get us to this point. And Mr. O'Rourke, does that sound right to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It gives us flexibility. Good explanation.
Okay.
All right, Mayor, this and council, this is David, and what we have is a motion and a second on the floor for final reading. So I'm going to answer the question this way, because I think one amendment can clarify all of this. In order to adopt the changed budget, as Mr. DeMora mentioned, this budget has changed from first reading. There needs to be an amendment to the main motion. And that amendment could be a motion to amend to include the budget as presented at this meeting, and to include the minutes of the Budget Committee of Council of this same date in the council minutes. So that would be an appropriate motion to handle both the amendment and the inclusion of minutes, if council wishes. But again, in order to adopt this new version of the budget, there does need to be an amendment to the main motion.
Okay, let me defer to Mr. O'Rourke as chairman of the finance committee. I think that would be a good motion coming from you in
Yes.
recognition of all y'all's work. Yes.
I would like to make that motion. I don't know if I can repeat it all, but as the attorney outlined.
Second.
Okay.
And
Mayor, this is Howard.
Yeah, hang on just a second. Let me make sure that Mr. Pagliarini, will you in effect sort of reread what the motion actually is?
yes, Mayor, I believe the motion is to amend the main motion to include the updated budget presented at this meeting, and as well as adopted by the Budget Committee, and to further include the minutes of the Budget Committee of Council of today's date in with the minutes for this council meeting. That is the motion.
Got
Is
it.
that correct, Mr. O'Rourke?
Yes, it is. So, and I'd like to move that motion.
Got it. Is everyone clear on that before we go to discussion? Mr. Santos seconded. Mr. Chapman, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Mayor, during the committee meeting, I made a presentation regarding the importance of drainage and resiliency. How does that get reflected, and at what point do we talk about how to get to starting the work on the old village drainage and the drainage cleaning crew? And at what point do we talk about how to do that?
I
Mayor?
will defer to either Mr. Demora or to Mr. Pagliarini as to where we stand procedurally with. So what you're saying, Ms. Chapman, is you would offer that as an amendment to the budget. Is that correct?
If it is appropriate at this time, or if there will be another budget discussion that will be more appropriate.
Okay.
So, Mayor and Council, this is David. Right now, we're talking about the amended motion that was stated. So current discussion should be on that and then a vote. Whether that's approved or not approved, it would be appropriate after this motion to accept further possible amendments. So any council members is welcome to make further amendments to the budget following vote on this amendment. Once all amendments are approved, denied, voted on, then you would go back and vote on the main motion as amended. So not during this discussion, but following the vote on this amendment, then further amendments could be made. And I would defer to Mr. Demora as to a later opportunity to discuss this issue, if that is Mr. Chapman's wish as well.
Thank you, Mr. Pagliarini. It's certainly up to council. You really have three places that could be discussed. It could be Public Services Committee. It could be Flood Resilience Committee. But usually any discussion of revenue generation happens at the Finance Committee.
Ms. Chapman, does that answer your question?
Well, I think it does, because we're taking the Finance Committee's recommendation and eventually putting it in the form of the budget. So it sounds like I'm going to need to make an amendment.
Yes.
May I speak? Okay.
Yes. Is that Ms. Landing?
Yes,
Okay, you're
Thank
not
you.
coming up on my screen, but you have the floor.
Okay, as long as you can hear me and see me, that's good. Okay,
There you are.
again, thank you. Again, there's been a lot of time spent before Mr. Chapman was even on council on this subject. And what we are waiting on is some very, very important information from FEMA about grants that, if in fact are awarded at the level that was requested, which probably won't be the case, from what I understand, it's typically something less than that. But if they're awarded at the level that FEMA was requested, would just about pay for the first two things that were requested, which is Royal and Edwards. So what we're hoping, and this is Mr. Demora has mentioned this several times, we're hoping that we will hear something soon, which is likely. And when we do, we would be able to fund the first phase and perhaps even the first two phases of this work. And the permitting for the first phase isn't even done yet. So it couldn't have started before this anyway. The permitting for the second phase is a little further out, so it couldn't have started yet. So I don't think this is a discussion for tonight. I think it's great information, but I think right now we need to pass a budget so that on July 1st, we can start forward for the new fiscal year. And then when these FEMA grants come through, if they don't come through, if they come through with zero, which is unlikely, but if they come through with zero, then we have to go back and revisit this through both finance, public services, et cetera. And we may have to do something which may end up adjusting the budget going forward. But right now, I think we need to stick with what is on the books and talk about tonight's amendment to include what was discussed in budget and then approve our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Landing. So as I take it from our legal counsel that we have to vote on this first, and then we can make amendments, or it's not unheard of to make other changes at a later date. Mr. Demora, I guess all things being equal, as our economy is coming out of this, and as the town is getting back to normal, we know we're not back to normal yet, as evidenced by the fact that we're meeting by video. Would it be unheard of in June or even July, once we're in the new fiscal year, if we see things that we need to pivot on or change, that we would be able to go back and take a look at some of these things?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So we would be able to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Chapman, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it does. I just want to make sure that the minutes, including the slides, including the suggestion, and most importantly, including the fact that South Carolina DOT, with the help of Tim Henderson, the district engineer, Leland Colvin, state highway engineer, and Christy Hall, the secretary, have agreed to give us back the $1.2 million to help with the drainage improvements in the old village, and to suggest that there is a way, if we don't get that FEMA money, to get started on the drainage improvements with a potential small amount annually.
Right, but we could always come back to that, is what we're hearing tonight. We can come back to that because there are things in the balance.
Yes, sir, and I'm happy with that. I just want to make sure the record reflects, as I think has been suggested, that other information will be part of the record.
Yes, I think what we're saying is all the minutes from the budget meeting, which would be your whole presentation on flooding, including the recent event, all that would be as an exhibit or attachment to these minutes. So yes, that will be included.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, so keep in mind that if there are other amendments or motions, they can be made after we vote on this, which is a motion to amend the budget as presented from the Finance Committee, and to include the Budget Committee minutes from the meeting that we just had. Is there anyone else who wants to be recognized before we vote? All right. Since this is the budget, let's have the clerk call the roll, please.
Ms. Corley.
Yes.
Ms. Corley votes yes. Ms. Hyatt.
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing.
Aye.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke.
Tom?
I'm sorry,
Mr.
I was
O-
muted. Aye, yes.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke votes yes. Mr. Rambo.
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos.
Aye.
Mr. Santos votes yes. Ms. Whitley.
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Chapman.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
All right, so the motion to adopt an amended budget and include the budget minutes passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. I have a quick question.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
We do need a final vote on the amendment as, or the budget as amended, and it's possible that others might have amendments, so we need to do that prior to leaving this item.
Motion to approve the budget as amended.
We have a motion to approve the budget as amended. Thank you. Amended and amended, and a second. We have discussion. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the budget as amended, please, the operating budget as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so that passes unanimously as well. Now, do we have any suggested amendments to the budget that we just passed? Anybody, anybody's microphone on mute? All right, so I just want to wrap up, Mr. Chapman, where we're going to leave it, because I have some questions too, and I have some questions about some alternative ways to fund drainage as well, and I've done a lot of research on that. As we wait for the FEMA grant application that Ms. Landing was talking about, and I thank you very much for getting on the phone to those folks we knew that you have known a lot longer than most of us have, and getting the DOT funding back. That is a huge help, Mr. Chapman. Thank you very much. So we can still, this is probably the strangest time for any budget to be passed in recent history of this town, we still have the flexibility to change things as we need to and to make other priorities. And I for one, have some in mind, but I don't think this is the time to do it. And we will take a look at that later. Is there anything else? That concluded item number 10 on our agenda. If there's nothing else, item 11 is to adjourn. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, this council meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.